Καλημέρα σε όλους και καλώς ήρθατε στο Economica. Welcome everybody to Economica, all about economics. Shout out to all Spartans. What is your profession, Spartans? Okay, so I'm back again, back into time with more details about this dreadful argument about the welfare payments for people who are disabled. Okay, so I discovered some very interesting things, and I wish this video, the content, not the video, the content would reach as many people as possible, as many viewers as possible. Impossible, that's impossible. I know that it is impossible, so I wish it would reach out to as many UK people as possible, because I know it can clarify a lot of things which are actually going on in the UK economy, and specifically for the disabled part of the population, let's say. Okay, or as I would rather define, diversely able people, because you can be disabled. I'm not don't want to make a joke, but I always presume that somebody in a wheelchair would be much more efficient than any clerk or office worker who basically taps in at 9 AM with his badge, and then at 10 AM is already downstairs at the near Costa Coffee having a cappuccino, having a cigarette, going up for an hour or so. After the cappuccino, probably the perfectly bodied Aryan pure English race employee would stop in at 9 AM with its wonderful badge, would be down out of the building, off the desk at 10 AM, down the nearest Costa Coffee, wherever is the Greg's shop, and he's taking his cappuccino, having his fag, and then going back up to the office, still far from the desk because he's going to take a big shit in the lavatory, and then just mock up something, and then it's lunch break, and then go back up to the office, and then you have another break, another tea time break, etc. So you see, the perfect body, the employee, is way less efficient of somebody who is a British person who find himself or herself in a wheelchair. They can't walk away from a desk. So I'm sure somebody who is in a wheelchair is a way more efficient worker than somebody who can walk away. So back in my previous life, I have this wonderful experience of seeing people running from the tube to the desk and then just flying away 2 minutes later to the nearest Costa Coffee for their cappuccino. And so that's why I like to say, I think it's more kind to and appropriate to describe, more to say diverse, somebody who is diversely able, with body and mind is diversely able, because not everybody has the classical mathematical or like 1 + 1 = 2. There are musical intelligence, there is arts intelligence, painters, musicians, actors. I mean, English people, they are wonderful actors, theaters, the country of Shakespeare. So there is a wealth, a richness of diversely able people. But here, it's where the rabbits road, because the problem, I think I can give you a hint. I don't presume to explain anything. I give you a hint why not democracy doesn't work, but legislating per se doesn't work. Let's take the Equality Act 2010, 2 pages, 348 pages of documents. People, they can't be discriminated, there have to be safeguards in the workplaces, So we have legal protection for diversely abled people under Part 2, Chapter 1, a physical or mental impairment that has substantial long-term adverse effect on personal ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities, like what's the definition they presume to give. So disability is one of the protected characteristics. It is unlawful. Okay, remember what I'm telling you now. Yeah, just take pen and paper and write it down. It is unlawful to discriminate directly or indirectly against a person because of disability. Section 13, Section 19 of the Equality Act 2010. Remember this line, it's wonderful, remember it. Treat someone unfavorably due to consequences arising from their disability. That's Section 15. Fail to make reasonable adjustments. That's very, very important, yeah? Fail to make reasonable adjustments in employment, services, or education. Section 20 of the Equality Act 2010. So there are other parts of the 348 pages. Duty to make reasonable adjustments, so you have to adjust the workplace or any other, I don't know, public libraries or hospitals which are accessible to diversely abled people, like having sound signals at traffic lights if somebody is partially blind or is blind, or you don't like fake red lights because it's a plastic refraction physical effect of a normal plain light bulb. So there have to be protection for pregnancy, maternity, all good, wonderful. That's also paternity leave, and then safeguards for families, etc., etc., etc. But the 348 pages of the Equality Act fails on two key principles. So there isn't any mandatory percentage number that specifies exactly for each employer. Like if we have businesses, like small businesses, they have, I don't know, 5 or 1, or I mean 5 because 1 is sole trader. So it's 5 or 2 to 10 or 2 to 20 employees. Or there are businesses which are still small, they go from 20 to 100, there are medium businesses 100 to 200, 250 people, there are large multinationals. Okay, so the Equality Act 2010 didn't provide at the time, 2010, any specified mandatory percentage that requires any employer, business in the UK to employ somebody who is diversely able, okay, or is in the part of the workforce that falls into protected characteristics workers. Okay, so what I'm saying is that if we take other developed countries, okay, there is a mandatory quota which says 7%, 5% of your workforce, my dear small, medium, large multinational, has to be, according to law, hired, has to be employed or taken away from the protected characteristics pool of the available workforce. That means you have to hire 5 to 7% of your workforce in your business have to be people with diverse abilities, call them disabled, whatever, like PIP, okay, PIP claimants, okay. So, well, how are you doing, PIPs? That's another episode. Okay, so the Equality Act didn't put into law I mean, they wrote 348 pages. I cannot basically understand why they didn't take a minute more to write another section and say another couple of sentences and say, okay, any small and medium business, you basically define according to brackets like from 2 to 20 employees, just 1% of your workforce has to be from protected characteristics. Then 20 to 100 employees is 5% of the workforce has to be employed from the disabled categories, etc., etc. So that's the first thing, okay? So that's one thing, that's one failure. Second failure, so the first failure, there is no mandatory requirements of any kind to hire people who are disabled, to give jobs to people who are disabled, okay? So that's I don't want to say a failure, but basically you do 348 pages of a legislation which has no effect at all on the equality, okay? It's not egalitarian at all. I know that in England they may dread this word of egalitarism because they think about the French Revolution and say, oh my God, go away from me, get out of that body, because they have a monarchy and there is a constitutional monarchy, so anything that resembles a republic, it's anathema for the British people. But basically, the British people, they boast themselves, they regard very highly themselves or the House of Commons because it's an open society, it's an inclusive society. So the first thing to do is, okay, establish a minimum requirements of disabled people that must be into work, and basically do an amendment to the Equality Act 2010 and establish that I don't know, 5% of the workforce for any small, medium or large business has to be employed with people of protected characteristics. Okay, that's, I mean, basic civilized sense of including as many people as possible in the workforce, okay? Because this whole mambo jumbo of the PIP welfare state, it's basically hidden unemployment, okay? There's just not much beating around the bush, okay? So if the government doesn't pay universal credit, somebody has to leave, and they find the way around and say, okay, I'll have to claim that I have bad teeth and I can't go to work, okay, I have a toothache or I have a headache, okay, all the most serious and less serious things, and then I can access some sort of job seeker allowance or universal credit subsidy, okay, to survive. So basically, within these 3.7 million people, more or less, there is a lot of hidden unemployment, which the British state is masquerading, okay? They just push them on a side and say, okay, no, you are disabled, or okay. They try to write off people. And that's really, really bad. And that's not the only. All developed economies, basically, they tend to do like that. They are very discriminatory in many sense. So I've addressed to you the first shortfall, okay? There is no mandatory requirements for any employer in the UK to hire somebody who is claiming benefits for any kind of disability. So the law must be improved. The Equality Act must be amended and written into law that UK employers like Germany or France or even Italy or Spain or Greece, they have a mandatory requirements to hire at least 3%, 5%, 7% of their workforce. They have to be people with some sort of disability or not full disability, of course. They must be able to work, but they are within protected characteristics citizens. Okay, so first requirement. Second requirement, it's another one. Now, the Equality Act basically does not have, again, a requirement for any employer in the UK to hire people of protected characteristics. But there is another problem, okay, which only legislation does not solve, because legislation is made with words. Okay, that's why democracy, sometimes the democratic process doesn't work. Okay, because producing law for the sake of doing something and having a showdown on the telly and unlock whatever it is, unlock the door. Okay, so that's not does not change in better lives of people. Why I'm saying this? Because the data, the hard numbers, okay, they basically give complete, no, I'm sorry, I'm just muffling about. So the data, the real data, explain that the Equality Act basically doesn't guarantee equality, okay, because you can all read here, there is an employment pay gap between disabled and non-disabled employees. So when 10 minutes ago I said, remember exactly what I'm reading, and I will read it again. It is unlawful to discriminate directly or indirectly against a person because of disability. Section 13, Section 19, Employment Act 2010. It is unlawful to treat someone unfavorably due to consequences arising from their disability. Section 15. You go to work, you have an accident at work, okay? I hope never happens this thing, because there is another problem in the labor market in many developed countries. People that go to work, they don't come back home because they die in the workplace. Okay, so that's terrible. Okay, so it is unlawful to fail to make reasonable adjustments in employment, services, or education. Section 20, Equality Act 2010. So, considering that the Equality Act says that it is unlawful to treat differently disabled employees from, let's say, normal employees, why the ONS has a 10-year time series data collecting pay gap between disabled and non-disabled employees? And even worse, I don't want to make it sound dramatic, but disability pay gaps in the UK 2014 to 2023. So Equality Act 2010, they start to collect data 4 years later, and they find that there is a pay gap. Yeah, there is something that doesn't work. So they find that there is a pay gap. So, withstanding the fact that the House of Commons is sovereign, okay, is the representation of the will of the electorate, they do a law, 340 pages, and then there is a pay gap between disabled and non-disabled employees. That's wrong. And why legislation has a huge limit? Because words are not numbers. Right? Look at this. What is the pay gap? 12.7%. Right? Do you know what is 12.7%? The national insurance contribution rate for employers, 13.8%. So the market, supply and demand of labor, prices the supply of labor and applies premiums or discounts according to what are their economic numbers, right? So that's why ordinary people, they are fed up with the blubbering of laws and stuff, and the merry-go-round of the round in the tellies, and all this 24/7 political commentary in all sorts of corners of the earth. Because what counts is the market, okay? It's you go. When I went to check this stuff, I understood what is the process behind. There is a pay gap because an employer, okay, exercise its will or its right, his or her own right, to price the labor supply. But because somebody who is diversely able and probably cannot be fully productive as somebody who, I don't know, is totally able to do something, what they do, they apply a discount on the pay per hour. The discount that we see here, which is the pay gap, okay, in 2023 equates almost exactly to the 13.8 national insurance contribution of the employer. So the employer, okay, according to the Equality Act, they don't have an obligation to hire people who are disabled. But when they accept labor supply from the disabled pool of the available workforce, they inherently utilize a discount which match almost exactly the NIC contribution that the employer pays towards the welfare state. Why? Because they know that there is a welfare state subsidy that can basically balance out the pay gap. So the Equality Act fails on enforcing the obligatory requirement of hiring people who are disabled. But the Equality Act says in section 13, 15, 19, 20 that it's quote-unquote unlawful to treat disabled people differently from other employees. So the pay gap, it's unlawful. Technically, it's unlawful. Okay? But I don't want to go into these technicalities because the market behaves in another way. Okay? And the market tells me, the ONS report tells me that this disability pay gap, 15.5% for women compared to men, okay, so there is a disability pay gap and a gender pay gap on top of everything, okay. It's, again, it equates exactly the 13.8% contribution that the employer has to pay towards the welfare state. And they can do that, they can do the arbitrage on the hourly pay of a disabled employee because they know that on the other side there is the welfare state that provides the PIP subsidy, the personal independent payment subsidy. So I hope, I really have my fingers crossed that you are following me, because that's very important to understand and it unlocks the reality of the thing. So the supply and demand of labor, basically of workforce, of workers, employees, basically opens the loophole of a pay gap arbitrage between disabled employees and other employees, which technically it can be done technically, okay, but the government writes down 340 pages, approves the thing, they basically play the drums, they go trumpeting all around, they are so marvelous, look how beautiful we are so the top of the top, and then everything goes into the dustbin because nobody checks if this stuff is implemented. And then the gap opens and you see that the market goes another way, because the economic reasons, they are way much stronger than the political reasons. That's why I called my channel Oeconomica, okay, because the economy is the pillar of society. Okay, from the household economy stems the local community economy, and from with that there are the social interaction of people. I give you some jam, okay, or somebody comes to your door, knocks on your door, say, I forgot to in my shopping I forgot to buy salt, I forgot to buy sugar, or do you have tea bags, okay, some stuff like that. Okay, so those are the relationships that are in society. Okay, so those are mostly economic relationship, not in the bad sense. There is no trade-off between people. Okay, human beings, they are social animals. They need other people. Okay, but they need other people to prosper, to have a positive outcome altogether. So the positive outcome, it's good living standards, good wages. Okay, so the economic reason is the pillar foundation of a society, not the political reason. Okay, politics are ideas. They are in the clouds. They are in the hyperuranium. Okay, what Plato described as the world of the ideas, which is detached from the real world. We can try to achieve perfect beauty. Okay, as Plato said, we can try to achieve perfect beauty, and if we achieve perfect beauty, we try to tend to the truth. Or through love, we can achieve perfect beauty, or we can achieve the truth, or the essence of life. But ideas, they are in the world of the ideas. Political ideologies, they are in the world of the ideologies. Okay, 348 pages of the Equality Act, it stays on paper, but the economy works in another way, because the economy is the true, concrete, practical, monetary, social interaction of people. And in order for society to work together, people adjust to achieve the economic balance of having flows between people, transactions. Okay, so the disabled people accepts a pay gap because why? Because of another economic reason, which is the welfare state. Okay, so any politician or legislator or technician in the civil service, okay, who doesn't take into account this kind of the real behavior of people, which is not based on ideologies, but it's driven by practical needs, okay? Then it's pointless and it's useless to do all the showdown and do the political campaigning and promising to travel to the moon and back in 3 minutes and a half, right? Because it's the normal consequence is that people, they are fed up and say politicians, they are all the same, because I'm totally sure that politicians, they don't have a clue. They don't know exactly what they're saying. They don't know exactly the numbers, because the numbers, they are so vast, they are huge, and you cannot know everything. But they don't think outside the box of the ideology, and they are boxed in some sort of you are a horse with I don't know, the horse that had like that plastic mask, and then they cannot see on the right side or on the left side, and then they just go straight, and then they have no idea. Okay, so the economic reason is that there is a pay gap, which technically it should not be there, but there is a pay gap, which is exactly the contribution of the employer, because the employer knows there is the welfare state. So in that comes the fact that you have larger payables in terms of welfare transfers, and at the same time you have less receivables, because when a disabled person earns less, the income tax is less, and then you have a double expenditure because you have less income tax, and on top of that you have to fork out the subsidy for people who are diversely able, and then the subsidy for all the rest of it, like the NHS or all the care workers, all the stuff that goes around that thing, right? So that's where you need to act to take economic decisions. Take economic decision, and the input, you can take it from the market. And first of all, the DWP, the government says, okay, we're going to check if there is a pay gap between disabled and non-disabled employees, between men and women, okay, gender pay gap, disabled pay gap. Let's start to check that. Then, what you have to do, because you are forced by the market to do that, you have to provide a discount. As I said in my other video, what you have to do, okay, is to say to the employer, okay, I want to eliminate this pay gap. So you say to the employer, first of all, amend the Equality Act and impose a requirement for any employer to hire a part of the workforce from protected categories, right? Then you say to the employer, if you hire somebody or if you have somebody in your workforce who receives welfare subsidy because they are partially disabled, I will give you total tax credit for the national insurance contribution that you pay for each and every employee which is partially disabled. So if I give you a 15% discount to 15%, no more, okay, zero, okay, so I limit, okay, we have a pay gap, okay, 15 minus 12.7%, then the pay gap, it's filled the pay gap, and I have a top up of 2.3%, okay. How do I do that? Basically, tax credit to the employer, the 15% goes to zero, right? And then the employer has to guarantee that the disabled employee must have the same hourly pay for that equates to the median hourly pay, because the median hourly pay is £15.69. The legislation of we have the minimum wage, it's gone up to 11.21, some sort of £12. So the minimum wage still is below the median hourly pay that was 2023 of £15.70. Okay, that's 2 years ago, so probably the data surely is not the same today, right? Let's call it a 15.80 or a 16 pound, right? So first things first, close the loophole and then use the national insurance contribution and provide a tax relief, employer NIC rate, tax relief, zero employer NIC rate. Okay, so we close the pay gap and guarantee something on top of that. So in the 3.7 million people receiving PIP, there are around 620,000 people who are not so severely disabled, good for them, and they are in work, even more good. They should be, these people, they should be applauded, they should be lauded, because they should be really, the employer, the state, they should be really, really thankful to these people, because in all their physical difficulty, they go to work and they pay tax. And what happens is that the average salary, because there is a pay gap between £15.69 and £13.69 that is paid to disabled people, for £13.69 for disabled employees, there is a £2 difference, yeah? It's not £2, it's 2 quid, but it's not but it counts. It means that disabled employees, the average yearly wage is 26,700. while instead the normal average wage, according to that pay rate, it's around 29,000 a year. So you're talking about a 2-3 grand a year difference, which is it's a negative difference for somebody who is disabled. So that's wrong. Okay, so let's consider 26,700, and the average uplift is 7,000, because we take the 25 billion and we divide it by, in proportion of the 3.7 million, we come around a 6,600. Let's round it up to 7,000. Okay, and we know that the government has to keep quarter-on-quarter spending of 99.8 billion. So the government is spending 100 billion a quarter. Okay, I will show you now the numbers, because what counts is the economy, is the numbers. All right, it's not like the words and legislation. I don't live with that. Okay, social benefits other than social transfers in kind. Okay, so that's the yearly data. 2024, 388 billion. All right, that the same data with a quarter frequency, it's 99 billion per quarter. Okay, so in the first 3 months of 2025, we just off the nutter with 99 billion with this stuff. And people, they need the welfare state. Of course they need it. They should be helped more, not less. But I repeat the same thing, okay? I would be happier and I can have a much beautiful life if I can earn 30,000 a year rather than 7,000 a year. Yeah, I mean, it's simple reasoning in my view. Okay, so let's take the data as they are. So input the base salary with the pay gap, which is bad. That's the average welfare pay. We know the government, it's off with 99 billion per quarter, 100 billion per quarter. And then we can basically do a simple arithmetic thing. And the employer receives a 15% total tax credit, tax exemption for disabled employees. Okay, so they don't have to pay. Okay, the average salary is 26,700. If I put on top of that the 15% on the net salary, it means that there is a £4,000 tax just only for the employer national insurance contribution is 4,000. Because then there is the employee national insurance contribution, and there is the 20% income tax. So there are 3 taxes, alright? 3 taxes on a net salary, okay? So the employer pays on average 4,000. What do? We say to the employer, don't pay those 4,000, but you add it up to the wage, right? 4,000, and we go up to 30,000. But we should basically ask the employer to balance the pay gap. So we could theoretically presume that a yearly wage for somebody who is disabled has to be at least 30,000 per year, but for sure it has to be more than that. For sure it has to be more than that. All right. So let me check some other numbers that I have here. Okay, so if we calculate, if do some simple arithmetic, let's take this, okay? We take the median hourly pay of non-disabled employees, okay? Just to make a comparison. So at 15.69 pound per hour, the average net yearly wage is 30,600 205. So you can see now that if the government gives the 15% tax credit to employers for disabled employees, and then it closed the gap, because the median salary goes from 26,000, just take away the employer 15% tax, it goes up to 30,700. Yeah, I showed you just 10 seconds ago. And it happens to be exactly the median salary, the median yearly wage of somebody who is on a 15.7 pound per hour, or it's non-disabled, okay? Non-disabled employee. So that's the gap. The pay gap is that one, right? So if I want to eliminate the pay gap between disabled and non-disabled employee, the disabled employee must receive the tax credit or the employer national insurance contribution. But if I want to provide a complete uplift to the disabled person, I will have to start from the normal salary, then see what is national insurance contribution, 4,000. I add back the wage. So the net wage should be 35,195, more or less, pound more, pound less. Okay, but what happens then is that I give you the 15% tax rebate to the employer only for the employees that are disabled. But then the government says is allowed to withdraw the subsidy. So we balance the economy. We balance the economy because we balance the pay gap. We ask to the employer to lift up the wage of employees who are disabled. Okay? And then you ask to the employer to have a minimum of people that are hired from the protected, which have to be disabled employees, protected characteristics, which are not disabled, but they are basically people who are unemployed and are in the pool of the 3.7 million people of the personal independent payments subsidy. And so what happens is that the government makes a saving, net government saving quarter on quarter, 936 million. That's not for 35,000, it's for 26,700. Let's take the median wage according to 2023 data. We calculate the employer contribution. We say to the employer, tax credit, but those 4,000 that you should pay to HMRC, you put it back into the wage uplift, right? I don't want to hear a yay, nay, whatever, the moon and behind and back. So the disabled employee must be on a 30,700 a year wage net. Okay, I don't want to hear anything. All right, there's no compromise on that. And what happens? The government does not need any more to pay the £7,000 or on average £7,000 per year personal independent payment. So what happens is that if I don't receive £4,000 of national insurance contribution, but I make a saving, okay, the government doesn't pay 7,000, okay, so I'm saving 7,000, I'm not receiving 4,000, I'm net positive 3,000, and from that comes the net government saving per quarter. Not only from that, but you have income tax 30,700 per 0.20%. You have larger income tax, okay? So 30,700 has to be the net wage on average, the median wage, okay? Then it can be more than that, or less than that if it's part-time workers. So you have larger income tax and still you have larger employee national insurance contribution. Now, Projected saving per quarter is 936 million. Let's make the 36,335,000 times 4 quarters, 3.7 billion per year. Okay, on a 5-year horizon, you are on 18.7 billion saving. All right, so you take the first derivative. Take the first derivative of the expenditure. Who is into work? Who is receiving personal independence payment? How can I save that? Balance the pay gap between disabled and non-disabled employee, so the employer has to pay the same wage. They can't say I'm paying more. You are not paying more, you have to pay the same, because it's illegal to do that, right? So you're just making the law work, right? And then close the pay gap and give the economic incentive to the employer and say, okay, forget about the employer 15% rate on disabled employees' payrolls, right? I give a tax credit, but that tax credit has to become wage uplift. And then basically after the first 1, 2, or 3 months that you start to roll in this thing, then you can say to the personal independence payment people who are in work, I'll have to scale down your subsidy because we have made sure that your employer will pay you a wage uplift, right? And then you start to save money. That's the first derivative, right? And then you can work, as I showed in my other video, you can have an objective of achieving 10% of the population, not 10%, right? Let's run... Okay, no, just I don't want to mix up. So basically, only with this, there are 3.7 billion savable per year. Okay, because your payables, which are 7,000, just you're not paying that, and so it's plus 7,000. Then the receivable of 4,000, you're not asking for that, so your net 3,000 up. And on top of that, you have to add the employee national insurance contribution and the income tax. Okay, so the net saving on 4 quarters, it more or less projected net saving, it's 3.7 billion and change, right? So to me, that's a beautiful idea that if I could, I would put it into place now. Not now, but now, right? But it's astonishing how the real world tells the real thing, right? That the problem, first of all, is that there is a pay gap between disabled and non-disabled employees, and it's of £2 per hour. And the pay gap, it's the root cause of the need of the welfare state to top up the pay. So you can balance this gap, first of all, but you go with a bit of stick, which is not a stick because it's treat people the same, equally, yeah? There's no rocket science. But then you can say to the employer, which is moaning about whatever, say it's moaning about the tax increase. Okay, forget about the 15% national insurance contribution that you pay for the disabled employee. Yeah, I want to give you the good example. Yeah, so that's how that's the reason of existing of legislators, or politicians, or the state. If there are imbalances in the economy, like a pay gap, you make sure to balance the imbalances in the market, because the market can fail. The market is not perfect. The market is not always perfectly efficient. There are premiums and discounts that the market, the supply and demand of any services, goods, and workforce, it finds a specific equilibrium, right? So the job of a legislator, a politician, is not to be a demagogue. It's to be rational enough, okay, to see where the imbalances are in the supply and demand across all the sectors and the economy, and to balance where necessary. That's what the good state does. Okay, that's where you represent demos kratos, the power of the people, because you tell me if it's correct that somebody who is disabled is paid even less than somebody who doesn't have any problem, right? He's not in a wheelchair and has to pay a cab to go to work, you know. It's not, it makes no sense. It's the word, it makes no sense, because somebody who is disabled should be paid more than somebody who doesn't have any particular issue, right? So that's the first thing that has to be corrected, and it's urgent. It's urgent to do that. Yeah, and it's within the remittance of the Equality Act 2010. And then you can improve the Equality Act 2010 and establish that there is a mandatory requirements for every employer in the UK to hire people within the protected characteristics. And to do that, I will give you a full 15% national insurance discount for the employer contribution. You give the wage uplift, and then the government can save on the personal independence payment, because the disabled employee, it's on a 30,000 a year, 35,000, 100,000 a year. I don't have any problem. As much money as they want to give them, it's not a problem for me. But it's just doing good in society, in putting things equal for everybody and helping people who are who are disadvantaged. Yeah. So I felt compelled to make to show the content, and I hope the content goes to the most people as possible, because they have to know that they've been treated unfairly. They are paid less per hour than the median wage, and that's not correct. Okay, especially if you need more money, but that money that is not wasted, because you need specialist doctors, you need probably special cares, you have to buy some special goods, so everything goes into the economy, the circular flow of the economy, and then you have a multiplier effect. Okay, so if again whatever, we saw that somebody who is on an average median 26,700, which is the median yearly wage of somebody who is disabled, receives a 4,000 lift up and goes up to 30,000, then there is a multiplier effect into the economy. Okay, let's say they consume 80% of their wage. We have, let's say, the theoretical multiplier effect, okay? It's 5, okay? So it means that if somebody who spends 80% of its wage and 20% is saved, in the economy there is a multiplier effect of 5. So that means that for every pound spent there is a multiplier effect of 5. So every pound it has a growth or a multiplier effect of 5 pounds. Yeah. So larger wages, they are good for the economy, and as I said in my other video, the economy grows organically because you are freeing up money from a subsidy. You are paying a higher subsidy and you are receiving less tax. So you scale back the subsidy and you scale back the tax. Net you're positive. The wage is larger because instead of being 26,000 it's 30,000 or 37,000, and then you have a multiplier effect in the economy. The economy grows organically. What is bad economic growth is what every government does. Top class is the United States. They borrow the money supply. So you have inflation, you have higher interest rate, you are in a stagnant economy. Higher tax, that's stagnation. Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. So if you balance a specific tax reduction, but then you cut spending larger, you cut more spending than the tax reduction, and then you have a policy and say, okay, I give you the tax reduction, but that must become a wage uplift, then the economy grows. I'm sure, it's in the numbers, I'm totally sure, I'm completely sure about that. And it's real GDP, yeah? It's not even like inflated GDP with money supply. So, thanks for listening to me, and I hope things can only get better. I hope things can only get better, but that's astonishing to me. I've discovered this stuff, it's astonishing. And yeah, that's the, come on, the famous D62 columns, social benefits, yeah? So those are the data, quarter on quarter, year on year, etc., etc., etc. But the ONS, it's astonishing. Disabled people, they are paid £2 less per hour, and that's not correct. It can't be like that. Yeah? So I hope things will get better, and if you can just drop a like or a comment to the video, you're welcome. And enjoy summer, and I wish you all the best for anything in the future. Have fun.